introduce Paul Braun from Continental mapping. He has a project called Taking Autism to the Sky. He submitted his abstract last fall and just to do a session on it, a half hour, and I immediately saw that this would be something that the entire audience would love, and so made a special arrangement to have him open up this Friday. So I'm going to get off the stage because he has tons of cool stuff to get into, and
right. Thank you.
So welcome, Paul.
It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I have 10 pounds of stuff I want to put in a 5-pound bag, as always. But thank you all for your attention. Happy Valentine's Day. We are looking at what I think about as a perfect storm. The combination of social awareness, geospatial awareness, special needs. There's a lot of different things happening in our world today that are really exciting. This project brings a lot of that together. My goal today is to convey that to you guys in hopes that you come away with a small piece that helps bring your technical world, the things you focus on, and bring that into your personal life, your family life, your community. I think that's really where our technology really starts to take off. So the trends that I want to look at today from different angles. One is the unmanned aerial systems, the drones. You know, when President Obama used the word drone in his State of the Union address, not in a military way, I knew we jumped the shark now, right? It's time to use the word drone. There's in the community debate what do we get to call these things. Frankly, I don't really care. We call them whatever we want, but the idea of this emerging technology, it is out there, it's being used, it's not a toy, and it's not only military. There's an incredible development there that's really going to change our industry. Not so much about hardware, but about the data that it can collect. And if you think you've got a lot of data now, just wait, because the idea of continuous collection is coming. Another trend is autism. And we'll talk a bit about that today, of what it is, what it means, what it's like, the awareness of that community, the resurgence of diagnosis and what's happening there, the numbers of folks that are out there. We'll talk about that as well. Our geographic awareness, that's what we do every day, right? We want people to understand how the world works from a geographic perspective. We have budget issues. So we tapped into the crowdsourcing idea, how to get funds at a micro level to fund a project. And then finally, the maker movement, the idea of building stuff from the grassroots up. So, Taking Autism to the Sky was in short a 6-month project where we brought a group of kids with autism together to build from scratch and learn to fly a drone, to capture the footage of the places they know, and create a short film or films about their experience. We have some of the TATTS team members here today in the VIP table up front. All their parents agreed to let them cut school, so I'm appreciative of that. I'm one of those parents. It was an easy call for me. Like, whatever, they're coming to my talk. So, let's talk about each of those trends. The first being the UAS space. How many of you guys have done RC stuff before? Radio-controlled hobbyist stuff? You see maybe 8, 10, 12 hands, maybe more. That's great. From the military side, we've obviously been leveraging this technology. There's sort of new policy that's been put in place about how we're utilizing this in Iraq and Afghanistan and all over the place. You know, as many technologies develop, it comes from the military. We're now seeing as some of the military efforts are decreasing, this technology showing up at USGS, BLM, Forest Service, right? So it's coming into our industry in different ways to basically as they decommission hardware and bring it into the private sector side of government, not the military side, right? There's the commercial fixed wing market. And again, there's lots of them. I just grabbed a few here. The sessions following this will get into a lot more detail about the different kinds of equipment. You know, the fixed wing tend to be very light, pre-programmed flight paths, those sorts of things. Embedded cameras, many of them basically crash land. or to softly land, so they're recoverable, but they have replaceable parts, things like that. And then the rotary wing, much like we think about from the photogrammetry and aerial acquisition side, right? We fly airplanes, we fly helicopters, etc. Lots of different sort of shapes and sizes on the rotary wing side. 3 props, 4 props, 6 props, 8 props. I don't know if anybody's got any more than that, but you kind of get a flavor of some of those there. Really big in the aerial photography, oblique, sort of personal use side, more so because you can hover. You can do things here that's a little different than flying any sort of airplane. So then our UAS, I have it here. It's a few pounds. It's a 6-prop X-rotor, commercial, actually a Chinese company that makes them. And then combined with other parts, landing gear, the gimbal to hold a camera, whatever camera you want to strap onto this. And big ones we talk about sensors. Really this can hold your Canon or your Sony or your whatever, all the way up to a little more. Again, the heavier stuff you put in it, the shorter the thing can fly, right? So a few other parts about what we utilize, and we'll see some video and things like that about how we utilize this throughout the summer. Our focus was not so much on collecting data we're going to turn around and turn into orthos or surface models and sort of the heavy duty lifting that we do professionally. This was more about the experience of flying. But I think there's a hybrid here that's really interesting in why this technology is going to influence us so much as it develops and becomes commercially available more broadly. So here is my son using the goggles, interacting with the television or base station, doing a real-time video feed down. So obviously there are rules to using this stuff. I would not recommend buying it and going and flying it down by the Capitol or in Manhattan like folks have been on CNN because they crashed into a building, etc. The recreational use, which is the guise in which this entire project happened. Basic rules to remember: keep it under 400 feet. Don't fly around airports. Pilots usually don't like that. 3 miles generally. And a reasonable distance. It sounds like an attorney wrote that, right? Keep a reasonable distance from airports. I'm not from populated areas. So that's more of discretionary. But that's basically the rule of thumb. There are certificates authority through the FAA to get formal approval to use this in the kinds of projects that we think about professionally every day. Those can only be gotten by governmental agencies, and it's not a trivial effort. And we'll talk more about that in the detailed sessions coming up here following this talk. But there's a lot of UAS work happening in the military right now. We go to Camp Douglas or any military bases because their airspace is not commercial, so they can do basically whatever they want inside of those bases. So some of the UAS hardware I've shown earlier is being actively used there. And then keep in mind too, internationally, they're frankly miles ahead of us. Much like cell phone technology developed in Finland and Korea and other places, and they had 3G long before we knew what 3G was, the UAS market is the same thing. They are 3 to 5 years ahead of us easily, using this in high power transmission line inspections, which I know would scare some folks here from ATC when you think about it, all the way through to environmental monitoring and everything in between. So very aggressive market happening overseas that we're frankly going to learn from and not repeat some of those mistakes they found, which is good. And then the FAA recently released a roadmap. They are several years behind integrating this stuff into the national airspace. The big issue they have is collision avoidance, right? Airplanes are smart enough to know and tell the pilot where you're going, who's around you, at least for any commercial grade types of things, with the deltas of the world and so on. This stuff doesn't have that yet. And there's a lot of concern about how you integrate this stuff, because this goes into a motor of a jet plane or causes conflict, really bad things can happen. So there's a lot of discussion about it. Frankly, I think one of the things to remember too is that there's this discussion of 50 pounds and under. So the small UAS stuff, that's really what's going to impact us. This sort of thing. The gliders, things that are flying at several hundred foot level that can collect the kinds of things on our sites. Doing a collect to get imagery for all of Milwaukee County or Dane County or whatever. story, but corridors, riverways, railroads, all sorts of things like that. Really good applications of it. So a lot of discussion here. We're probably looking at least end of next year before this stuff's truly, the small stuff is integrated into the airspace with rules and regulations and things like that. So right now, we're doing it recreationally, or we're working through military channels to fly in certain places, or we're working with governmental agencies to get those COAs, to get approval to fly Gizmo X on day Y at Site Z, right? So that's one trend, technology. A bit of a Trekkie, and I told my wife I wouldn't do the Captain Kirk impersonation. But, you know, what is autism? And I wonder, to show of hands here, how many people have family, you know, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters that is on the autism spectrum? More than those who are doing radio control hardware, so that's good. So maybe 20 or so. In addition, how many folks have a relationship to someone who is on the spectrum, through work, through your community, things like that? Yeah, so maybe 40% of you? Seems like just half of the room. That's great. So, you know, Bones would tell Jim all the time, Jim, I'm a doctor, not an engineer, not a mathematician. He's not a neuropsychologist either. You know, autism is a spectrum disorder. It's a complex neurological disorder affecting people in interesting ways. One, social interaction, communication, and behaviors. It is something that's in your brain. It's not because we used to think, you know, we dropped the child on his head, or it was bad parenting and all this nonsense. There's very clear understanding now about the implications. In addition, there's a tenfold increase in the prevalence of autism in the last 40 years. So this is, a lot of people say, oh, that's because we're just better at diagnosing, and it's not the case. There's more than that, and there's been lots of studies that look at that. The increase is happening, and it's real. One of the sort of famous folks on the autism spectrum is Dr. Temple Grandin. She's an articulate PhD on the spectrum, who's a fascinating person to see speak. And here's a quote from her. One of the most profound mysteries of autism is the remarkable ability of most autistic people to excel at visual spatial skills. I'm like, ooh, that sounds awfully familiar, right? We think often in pictures, and that's how she talks about it. I thought everybody thought in pictures when I was young. Now, she has the ability to communicate that verbally. That's not the case in a lot of other situations of folks on the spectrum. The Claire Danes was in the movie Temple Grandin, that if you have any interest, I would recommend watching that. It's really fascinating, sort of insight into her as a person. Again, 10 people on the autism spectrum look like 10 different people on the autism spectrum. If you have an appendicitis and I have an appendicitis, we pretty much know what to do. It's not the case with autism. It's very different across people. It sort of manifests itself in different ways. So some facts. 1 in 88 American children is on the autism spectrum today. If I did this talk 10 years ago, that would have been a different number. It was 1 in 140 something or 60 or whatever, I forget the exact number. But 1 in 54 boys. Obviously a prevalence of boys. The TATTS Project, all boys. Tried to get some girls, but couldn't do it. 1 in 54. 25% are nonverbal, so people like Temple Grandin, it's something really special when they can be that articulate about their thoughts and their ideas. 40% have average to above average intellect. You know, one of the things I've learned throughout all of my experience there is just because somebody can't tell me what they want doesn't mean they don't know what they want. It's about finding the right tool to communicate. So, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Granted, I was only 1 year old when the movie came out, but there's a study out of Yale. This is a movie with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Very simple cast, heavily social, a lot of dialogue, a lot of intense sort of 60s melodrama. The Yale University did a study, and they looked at, with eye tracking software, this is 15 years ago or so, where do people, sort of neurotypicals, normal people, we like to use the word neurotypical, where do they focus? They focus on the human connection, where their lips meet in a passionate moment in the movie. Where do the people on the autism spectrum focus? The light switch. Yeah, I mean, it's like, really? That's amazing. It's just, that's not necessarily a, well, that's better. It's that it's different. That's what is of interest to them. Maybe they think about electricity and they think about mechanics and things like that, and it's just not of interest. I'm guessing a little, but another one, when the young couple comes to visit, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor are having trouble in their marriage, and it's this intense fight. At one point, they come their neighbors for dinner. Richard Burton smashes a bottle on the table out of anger, and that's the look on their faces, like, holy cow, he's going crazy. So where do the neurotypical people focus? Up through the woman's eyes and across to the men's. Where do the autistic viewer look? I'd be interested what like a Pokemon video would be like these days, for those of you that have youngsters, you know, or some of the other things. You have their high five and they're at the TATTS table. People on the autism spectrum have some incredible traits. The ability to focus deeply, to attend to detail, to be very literal, black and white, visual learners, acute senses, and I mean like smell, touch, things like that. Unique talents and perspectives. And I would suggest we have those same challenges. When we talk about land cover, you know, where does the line hit for a transition from agriculture to suburban at a 1 to 100,000 scale? What does that look like at 1 to 25,000? You know, environmental data, where is the high water mark? Now this, I kind of make it easy because it's like, well, there it is, but at what time in the flood was the high water mark? Right? We have those same issues of life is not black and white. Maps are abstractions of reality. That's what we do every day, is we transition something into points, lines, and polys so that people can do stuff with it. You know, in our company, doing lots of LiDAR and mobile stuff and what have you, you know, I've had many conversations about specifications, you know. We did a DOT mobile LiDAR job, and there was some discussion an entire hour of, you know, a lot of smart people. Where is the edge of road? What is the edge of the road? And it's because we were doing mapping on a road that was pretty old and crummy, and, you know, it sort of was concrete, and then it sort of was grassy gravel, and then it was gravel. So where do you want us to draw the line, right? And when you got crazy detailed mobile LiDAR data, you can do a lot. So it's about clarity. It's about getting to that and abstracting that in the right way. And bringing that out into CAD data sets or geodatabases or open source data sets, whatever the case might be. You're pinning that down into something. You have to make a decision. You know, we did a job for the Corps of Engineers, and we had a whole discussion about, they had 7 different data sets that all defined their lakes. And as a Corps of Engineers, this is down in Tulsa, was like their primary resources, all their lakes, and all the things that happen recreationally, etc. And they said, for crying out loud, can't we just get one data set that represents our lakes? It's like, well, it depends. You know, was it in March or in September when you mapped it? What were you actually mapping? How do you do wetlands? And, you know, what's open water or you know, flowing water, all these kinds of things. So we have those same issues of trying to delineate that. Now, one last comment on autism is that employment is a really challenging issue right now. You know, the diagnosis has increased, the numbers that are there, they're swelling in our schools here in Middleton. We're way above the national average because it's a good district. People know that. They come here for services. We have sort of loosely defined, it could be 2, 3, maybe 4 times as high as the national average. Those numbers aren't available, but you sort of get to know the community. 70% of young adults on the spectrum, I'm talking in their 20s, were unemployed in a recent study. 70%. And beyond that, the Down syndrome community, the cerebral palsy community, had much higher employment rates than autism. And when the folks on the spectrum were working, they were making less money, like $8 an hour, $8.10 or something like that. Very menial, and a lot of it is the social problem. You sort of look and you look the same, but then we get you into positions where you're not going to succeed. because that person can't articulate needs, they don't have the social dynamic, and therefore they bump heads and bad things happen, inappropriate comments, on and on and on. So there's a real drive now to deal with teaching folks on the autism spectrum things that can help them succeed and contribute in meaningful ways. And this technology, and that's where this trend is coming, there's some real promise there. Another trend, the maker movement. You know, this was sort of coined in about 05 or 06. You know, there's a full organization that does maker fairs. They've been all over the world. It's part county fair, part inventors, part sort of cerebral discussion, part electronics. You know, they have a magazine now. It's sort of beyond just that organization. You know, the White House just announced 10 days ago that they're going to do a maker fair at the White House. This was a science fair last year. I love that shot. They were shooting marshmallows out of a can. I feel like you do that when you're 12 years old. Go to the White House and be like, you know. That'd be pretty cool. Put that in your resume. Like, fire that kid. It's pretty cool. But the idea that we can make our own stuff, you know, manufacturing, everyone says, oh, manufacturing, it's tanked. We don't make anything in the U.S. anymore. We have hotels and restaurants. We're a service industry. Well, that's not true anymore. There's sort of resurgence with technology, microelectronics, 3D printing. You know, you can literally start from scratch and build the things you want. A lot of people build this stuff completely on their own. You know, they got laser cutters, so they're cutting their own carbon fiber. There's a lot of, you can download all these CAD drawings and stuff. You know, it's amazing what people are doing in their free time. You know, there's an organization here called Sector 67. It's a makerspace in Madison, and for a small fee, and you sign their waiver, because it's, you know, it's a pretty intense place. You go in there and do everything from welding to computer work to 3D printing to a variety of other things, and it's filled with people who are thinking that way. So this intention of, there's a resurgence of making things and being creative. You know, I think part of it came from the DIY movement, right? I'm more of a this old house guy than I am an HGTV guy, but I always feel like I've been productive. You know, if you sit on a Saturday and watch the guy drywall his basement, oh, I felt like I did something. Anyway, you know, there's, I think a lot of that has sort of brought that into common culture, and now it's really taken off. And you're going to see more of that in the schools, high schools, colleges, etc. of how do we leverage that. And I think our city councils and our county board members and things like that are looking for creative ways to solve problems. And this might be an answer to figuring out a way to kind of do it yourself. So this big idea came like, wow, we've got this autism thing really growing. We're dealing with it on our personal lives. We have this technology that's emerging that's just amazing. What if we brought them together and somehow used the technology to give these kids a way to see the world in a different way? And then we have the same problem you guys all have, like, okay, where do I get the money? Right? So we went to the crowdsourcing model. Kickstarter is just one of a whole bunch of them. There's tons of ways out there. What matters is it's micro donation. And I'll talk a little bit about where the dollars came. You see 75 people gave us about $3,400. I had to set a target. That's how Kickstarter works. You set a number, and if you don't meet it, nobody pays. If you meet that number, then you get everything. So people donate. I'll give you $50, but only if you raise, and my goal was $2,600 because I ran the budget. So I was going to build this thing, do everything we wanted for a couple grand, basically. And we made more money, so we did other stuff. We bought extra equipment and more batteries and things like that. So this was a 40 days. I did the social media thing, tell everybody you know. Chris Anderson is the former editor of Wired magazine and now runs 3D robotics out in San Diego. I was hitting him up directly, asking him to retweet posts. He did, you know, for his 110,000 followers. He kicked in cash and promoted it, you know, just trying to anyway get a little mojo flowing. And the dollars just came in. It was incredible. And there were awards that we offered. So we had two people give $250 a piece, $100 a piece, and then $25 and so on. You can give 10 cents if you wanted to. There's no limits in this particular application of how it was about. But about 40% of the people that donated, I had no idea who they were. But the idea resonated. They were technology guys. Like, you know, I got a few of those. This is just cool. Here's 25 bucks. Go make it happen. No strings attached, by the way. There were people that have, you know, kids, family members on the spectrum, etc., and then a whole mix of other. So you see the $100 donators, the $25 donators, and then 15. So you see people, Nadine just said, yeah. I mean, these people from all over the world. There was Middle East, Eastern Europe, Russia, etc. Just unbelievable. Now, the vast majority were from our social network and some professional or personal thing, but the ability to tap in if the story's right is there. It's a matter of sort of putting things together that resonate with people to give up a little bit of their funds in a unique way. So that all came together. We launched a blog. We blazed forward. We looked for kids, tried to convince people what the heck we were up to. It wasn't a hard story. The kids were just dying, and the parents are dying to have interesting outlets for their children. So I wanted to first now introduce the team. This is where you need like music from The Incredibles or something, right? For all the youngsters out there. Mitchell, my 11-year-old son, is here today. He was the inspiration for this. Mitchell, do you want to stand up? He's waving. So Mitchell's the consummate maker. You know what that means, Mitchell? It means you like to make stuff, right? We used to say he could go through a stack of paper plates in a weekend, just making stuff. We go through duct tape like it's going out of style. Because that's a creative outlet. And that's kind of where the idea came. So he's the inspiration. Kevin Chang is the peacekeeper. Kevin goes to Madison schools, and his mom called me last night. She said, "We're not coming." I was like, "Oh, that's too bad. Why is that?" Kevin has last year and going into this year, sorry, no, do not move my computer. No. Kevin said, "I'm not going." He's had a perfect attendance record last year and this year, so he's blowing me off for that. And I said, now there's a guy I want to hire when he's 19, right? He's going to show up every day. I just love it. He's like, "No, get my perfect attendance, man. I got my priorities." Deep focus. It's incredible. And he's a hugger, too. So he was the peacekeeper. Connor Williams was the pilot. He looks like he just won a gold medal at Sochi or something, Connor was, a lot of kids, pretty heavy on the stick, right? I mean, I'm not playing a lot of our video because you'll get seasick. It's like, I'm just cruising all over. Connor was the epitome of a quality pilot. Really controlled, measured, he understood it. You can tell he's flown a lot of the toys and things prior. Torrin, my youngest, is the energizer. Torrin was one of the younger folks in the team, but I think his energy level sort of is the same as all the others. So, and his spirit, he was a great contributor to the team. Henry Spalding was the assessor. Henry was the, what is up with this? Maybe that's kind of your guys' role, It's like, is this stuff really going to work? Like, what are we doing? And it's very, contemplative. But was there, and you see his Minecraft shirt, right? He tells you where his head is at. So he was our assessor, evaluator. Elias was the youngest. He's the go-getter. I didn't know he could talk for about 6 to 8 weeks. And we got together, he never said anything. And one day he started talking, and we were like, he could say stuff. You just never quite sure what was soaking in. This was a day when we actually strapped the GoPro onto bike helmets and we're doing video transmission and cruising around. So this was before we put it up in the air. Anthony was our technician. Anthony, first day we were there, we were doing some building. I'll show you in a minute of actually building this thing. We were talking about electricity because we did some soldering and things like that. He said, well, Ohm's law states that and I couldn't even tell you what the heck he said because I started glassing over, Here he's 14 years old, he's schooling me on Ohm's law. I mean, he's destined to get an EE degree or something. Just really cerebral and understood what's going on in the electronic side. I tell you what, if I owned a fleet of these things and I need guys to maintain them because they've obviously crashed, you can see the little bend here and what have you. What did Justin say? Every good drone has some duct tape on it, because it's been out in the field. He'd be the kind of guy you'd want fixing. working your maintenance crew and keeping these things in the air. And then the four amigos, right? This is the older posse. So we had everything from 7-year-old up into Ian on the left, and his brother Ian is a freshman in high school. Ian and Tate Mullen, my son Harrison, and Alan Drzezinski. The four of them were, yeah, they're high-fiving. So round of applause for you guys. So they, you know, we kind of split in groups sometimes, and because of age differences too, it was both need and age that we had to sort of accommodate. But they were really great contributors to the overall project. So the first thing we needed to do was learn how to fly. We did not go the UAS route. We did not go with hardware that was autonomous. Right, a lot of the ones I showed you, you know, you're doing mission planning, flight planning. You know, this thing will not fly itself. It'll hold still because it's got an IMU and it's got GPS. It'll hold still within a meter of its location in space, but it doesn't know where to go. So you can't say go from waypoint A to B to C to D, so I map my parking lot and then land. Right? You could gut some of the electronics and replace it, and you could do it. But our goal was not that. Our goal was about the experience of flying. So a little bit different maybe than what we do professionally. So we got a simulator, and we spent our first days and get-togethers flying. Now, you know, when I was getting into this, and pilots, professional pilots, and our sea guys would take, you got to get 20 hours of flight time on a simulator before you fly. I'm like, well, I'm not so sure that's going to happen with all the kids. So we flew with a buddy box, so we had two machines. I was flying, and then the kids would fly, and I'd give them control and take away control when they were about to smash into stuff. So, which generally we were in big open areas, it wasn't a problem. But we wanted to spend time in front of the simulator. So, you know, giving them time for that, it was very much like the handheld video games. It was sort of fun. You could use lots of different hardware. You could fly fixed wing, you could fly rotary wing. It has all sorts of telemetrics about, you know, your altitude, your speeds, and all that kind of stuff. Harrison's going Western on us here. I'm not sure what's up there, but I just love that pic. There's the Peacekeeper. We're fighting over controls. Here you see the beginnings of our base station. We actually got 2 TVs. We're visual learners, right? We're addressing the needs of autism. We want people to see stuff. We don't want them all crowded around with personal space. We want to give that and expose that to people. We wanted to work on social because we could all be a little bit nicer. So, you know, we gave cue cards. I can't say this was a raging success necessarily, but the idea was, let's support each other. We're a team. Let's work on those things while we're also playing with technology and seeing new things. Here's Mitchell working the simulator. Here's Torin. Can you tell me what's happening here? Yeah. Yeah, we sort of had to retool expectations. We're like, look, crashing is bad, okay? Please, once the $2,000 gizmo is in the air, that's not what we're going to do. But it was fun, and if you can't have fun when you're doing stuff, what's the point, right? So we had a lot of good times with that, and the kids responded well. Once this thing was in the air, it was, you know, the real deal. We spent some time flying toys, right? We wanted to kind of gauge skills, interest level, you know, just doing, plus it was still kind of cold outside, so we were inside just playing around with the toys. That was helpful. We were dealing with disappointment. We didn't have enough. If I did this all over, I'd get 5 of these things and a whole lot more toys, right? In terms of lessons learned, you know, younger generation wants more faster, I don't want to wait in line, and all those kind of things. Then we had to build this thing from scratch. I mean, it came in a box. So the kit was the motors, the props, the arms, and the NASA controller, which was basically the CPU, and that was it. So we built it from scratch. We walked through it with the kids. We had several sessions. So it was the basics of putting this thing together, teaching them soldering and how that works, and giving them all a chance to put this thing all together. And then we had to maintain it as we went, so there's loose parts and things like that. But the trick was really getting everybody a chance and being part of it and seeing this thing from the ground up. So, finally, we get to fly that thing, right? Here's a quick little clip. This is out at Triton Farms. If you guys have ever been out in Lodi, they do a really cool corn maze. So we went out and flew it in the spring before the corn got real high. I'm not getting sound on that. There's a sound guy still here. But that's okay. Basically sounds like bees. So, first person video. What we did then is, do we have sound? I'm disappointed because the sound is really what matters here. Thanks, Justin. What we're showing here is the what they call first-person viewing. So the idea is there's a camera. So this kind of thing you might not need, but there's a transmitter and an antenna that goes to a base station with a receiver and an antenna, and then we feed that into goggles that are not HD, standard definition goggles, and a television. So the idea was that we want you to feel like you're sitting in the cockpit. Now, there's definitely applications for our industry in terms of search and rescue. You want to be looking and then tell the pilot, well, fly over here, fly over here. You know, that's different than zip, 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 mow the grass, give me imagery, and let's go make orthos, right? It's more about let's figure out where to go because it's experiential. We're not quite sure. Maybe there's grass fires or things like that where you want to actually navigate as the need arises. So we're, before we put it in the air, which is another thing to remember, is slowly build, right? Add on. Don't just go for it all at once. So what we're doing is we're turning that on, we're showing them, and then projecting that to the TV. And I wish we could hear the sound because there's a lot of oohs and ahs. Here it is, maybe you can always come back to it. But the idea, you watch what they all do. There's Mitchell right to the camera.
Just watching, right? So eventually this thing will be, 400 feet in the air, or less. Now check out what the Coast Guard is doing. What's he doing? He's watching in the Fat Shark video, or the goggles. It's the same thing that you see on the screen.
So that was that first kind of starting really to bring all the pieces together, and the kids, getting excited about what they're really going to be seeing from the air. So then we started testing the first-person viewing technology to make sure it's going to work. We did a lot of that. Here's a quick clip of the base station because so you can see it a little bit. So the quality is fantastic. Right? So you'll see we're just flying out in the park. What you'll see, if that ran longer, I cut it short just because of memory here, but you'll see occasional glitches, which is a concern if you're doing this and you get too far away. You do need a ham radio license if you're doing this, by the way, the video piece. Having that ability to kind of have video is great, but you can lose it because of interference. Size of antennas, there's lots of issues there from the instrument side of things. You're not going to be doing this with your gate wings and your robotas and things like that. Some of the commercial stuff, it's a little bit different, but it's real popular in the hobbyist community for sure. So having that base station and leveraging it was really important. So then we took them out. We wanted to get out in the field. So we did some flying at first, kind of hand over hand, giving them some experience of what this was like. We had the yellow on us, who was the flight crew, so we were talking about safety, and you don't get to play with this thing. It's about, okay, it's my airplane, it's your airplane, all the conduct that you have to deal with, making sure we're talking about that. We're celebrating the successes, safe landings, all this kind of thing. And then to just touch on the perspective taking. So the idea of the mental map research that's out there. What if you were to draw a map of your neighborhood, what would it look like, right? exquisite detail of your driveway and your home and your backyard and things like that, because you spend a lot of time there. But what would it look like? What happens between your house and the grocery store? Well, I know 2 roads, and I kind of remember that big blue house, right? But I don't know a lot, and then I get to the grocery store, and I kind of know that. So there's this research about mental maps and how we all sort of picture locations in our minds. So we did that a little bit here. We drew some pictures. So this is Alan. Now, Alan, you had an unfair advantage because your dad's an architect. And so Alan's drawing was pretty darn good. He's got perspective and the whole deal, right? But the idea, I want to convey that, put it down on paper. So he's got we flew in the backyard of the school in the summer with nobody around. It's a short flight, so we had the school. He's got a couple buildings, 2 trees, and then we went up in the air. So that's ground footage, obviously. And then we transition the camera on board. So you get the idea. It's about 2.5 horsepower we computed here in terms of the torque and motors and things. And you heard obviously that sound of ease. It's pretty intense. So we talked about what does the world look like from the air. Can you put yourself in other people's shoes or in the mind of a bird, right? Neurotypicals can do that. People with autism, that's a really difficult thing. That's a social skill that they're not wired to do. So we were doing that, talking about it, but then experiencing it in real time. So we made an arrow with our bodies as part of that video clip. So here's a clip after the drawing afterwards of Alan's drawing. So now he's got the Lakeview Park, he's got the lake in the background, he's got a horizon line, completely different perspective now. He went from, 10 feet off the ground, he could visualize, but 200 feet off the ground was something new. Mitchell drew an arrow of bodies. That's what he remembered. Intense focus. This is what I did. It was very real and tactical, and I laid on the concrete, right? His new drawing was the park and trees and a much broader vision of what the world was around him. Connor's drawing after the fact, the arrow, but then more, right? The neighborhood, the swing set, and so forth. So we sat back then and we evaluated, just like you would do in your field crew. How are we doing? What are we seeing? Do we need to change our flight plan? Are we flying too high, too low? Is the imagery going to be right? Is sun reflectance going to bother us? Right? All the kinds of things we're going to do in terms of aerial acquisition, the kids were doing as well. Then we went back into the house and we evaluated and watched the imagery in more real time and really enjoyed kind of what we saw there. And where the level of engagement was about as intense as it was throughout the entire project doing that. Here's a little, we finally got to the first person viewing out in the park. What do you think, Rachel?
Awesome! I can see the whole 2 fields.
Yeah, and that experience, it's kind of surreal if you've ever done this. From that perspective, it's you turn your head, but the world doesn't move, right? Because you're not using your eyes, you're using that thing's eyes. So I don't like it personally. I get a little seasick doing that sort of thing, but it's very immersive and kind of trippy to do that. But if you're good at it, which the guy that helped me a lot, Dan Fry, one of my coworkers, he's quite good at it. He really enjoyed that. I'd much rather fly line of sight and be watching my base station to know what it sees. So because once it gets 100 feet away, it's kind of hard to tell which way it's going, right? Which incidentally, that's why you have 2 red ones in the front. That's the front. So if you go pitch forward, it's going to go this way, right? But if you turn left and it goes to the right, that means it's not facing you, or it is facing you, right? So you have to often think backwards. So this is not a trivial effort to fly, which is why some of the autonomy that's available in other pieces is really quite handy. But the FAA is going to want you to be able to take over if something goes south and fly the thing. So you got to have kind of a mix there. So just some other shots of that. Kids out in the field. So you see Ian there, he's just like, whoa, this is so cool. One more clip, and we'll look at some of the imagery products.
Okay, go forward slightly. Stop.
Yeah, there's one next to the left.
Turn 90 degrees to the left.
So what do you think we're doing?
Stop. Turn like 45 degrees to the left. There. Now go forward. Stop. There's one.
All right, we got one.
So, search and rescue simulation. We took basketballs, put them out in the soccer field, and put grass clippings on them, and then they had to work as a team. So Harrison was working the goggles and basically navigating, and then the other guy was piloting. So we're working social skills, we're working teamwork, we're simulating real situations that's out in the news right now in terms of search and rescue and how they're leveraging this technology to solve real problems. Well, then this happens. So that was what the extra money went towards, was replacement parts. They're pretty durable all in all, but when you come down hard from about 30 feet on the arm, you're pretty much done. So a couple of clips. I'm going to skip one or two here just because of time. Sorry about that. So we're flying over a construction site. At about 250 feet. Now this is just a GoPro, so this is not a metric camera, right? This is just it takes great imagery and it's a fishbowl lens, so you get a great view of the world, but you're not going to do photogrammetry with that camera. There's far too much distortion. But there's a lot of folks out there, and we'll hear more about it in the next session, people using the NEX 5 or 7, the Samsungs, and a bunch of different cameras out there that you can do this, and even with a $2,000 piece of equipment, collect the kind of imagery with control, bringing it into the Pix4Ds of the world and other software packages to produce mapping products. One more clip. Who can guess where this is? Anybody? No, you get it. They're like, I don't know. Sturgeon Bay. Yes, good guess. So that's the canal going in from Lake Michigan. We have a family cottage right there, so we were up there in the late fall. So we flew a little bit there, but looking at plant identification, and that may just be enough. You don't need hard detailed mapping, high accuracy, even oblique stuff. This kind of thing would serve you quite well. And then lastly, just to look at a couple of the products, the mapping products here. So that construction site we flew. So we took that imagery, complete raw, did nothing to it. Because for this, with the kids, we wanted speed, we wanted to showcase capabilities. We brought this into a couple of different products. One of them is Microsoft Ice. Basically, it's made for panoramics. You go hiking and you click, 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 click. Microsoft Ice will seam them together with relationships between them to thread together and make panoramas. You can do the same with aerials. So we took about 20 different shots, said, okay, that's a ballpark, right? Because we didn't do waypoints, we didn't do some of the more formal stuff that you do with some of the commercial hardware. But to give you a sense of, the ground sample distance here is about 2 inches, give or take. So level of detail, if the right application presents itself, is definitely there. And again, this is just down and dirty, nothing fancy, no control, all that kind of stuff, right? Another couple examples. Out at Trinan Farm, so this is maybe 6 or 8 images. You look at livestock, you want to do counts, how many people are in your parking lots at the county parks on a Saturday, right? You want to do head count kind of stuff, or, all sorts of different things that you don't need heavy-duty accuracy, totally applicable for. Are you going to map infrastructure with this? Maybe. If you had a different sensor on it, you could. An example of that, a street intersection. You look at the level of detail I get there. Clearly, you can get to cracks in sidewalks and do all sorts of things that, for site-specific issues. And if you have the control to tie the imagery down and get into stereo and do all that kind of stuff, absolutely feasible. And with some of the products out there, like a Pix 4D, that there's a commoditization of this. Because now, let's say I want to fly this every 3 days at that big construction site that's happening in our community. I want to do time sequencing, or I want to look at cut and fill calculations, and all those kind of things. You put your control down once, it's there, and then it's just fly, 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 and you can sort of get the meat grinder going to produce the imagery and get the kind of data that you want in the analysis. But the amount of data you can collect is a lot, quite a bit. And we were talking the other day with some of the other folks active in this is, how much do you trust that piece of hardware or piece of software that sort of magically does this? We have photogrammetrists in our company that, I'm old school, and you got to have an AT solution, and I need validation, and RMSE error calculations, and all those kinds of things. And maybe in certain cases you do, but there's a lot of opportunity to utilize this stuff in different ways that may not require that type of detail. Lastly, there's a new business model developing that does this, that brings it all together. Here are 2 companies. One of them, the top one, is in Plano, Texas, and the other, Specialist Guild, is in San Francisco. There are others, certainly, but these are companies that build a business model around special needs. SAP announced last year they were going to hire 650 people on the autism spectrum for software testing, because they could give them a piece of code and these guys would just beat it up 6 ways to Sunday. So the idea of looking for business model that can support it, or the engagement of these kind of folks that have this kind of skill sets and ability to focus, bringing that into your city, your county, your private company, your state agency, and find fits for them that's not data entry. Not that there's anything wrong with menial work, but there's a lot of talent buried inside of bodies that are unable to convey that in traditional ways. So thank you to the kids, thank you to the parents, our financial backers, my colleague Dan, who couldn't be here today, but he was a huge help to my company for letting us go goof around and have a lot of fun with this. Mostly on weekends, but an occasional afternoon and things like that. And then takeaways. Drones are here, you guys. They're coming. They're not toys. They're going to change our industry, and it's all about the data, because the hardware's changing so fast, and there's so many flavors of it. And honestly, a lot of them are good. There certainly are some pros and cons to the different technology, but it's here. There are DOTs doing it. There's federal agencies doing it. The COAs are available if you go through the process. Take advantage of that. And then also there's a place for people with different abilities in our industry. And I would challenge you all to think about that and take the opportunity to value their strengths and work with them and find a win-win solution. Thank you very much. Now we're going to fly. They said we could fly in here, right? No, I'm kidding.
If you want to, go right ahead.
Great. It would round a little dicey.
I'd like to add another takeaway in that, we sit at desks a lot and looking outside. But a lot of people think what we do is cool. We like what we do, but other people think what we do is cool. And we should take that challenge and get out there to improve, lives of others, communities, and that with what we do. So thanks again. That's great.
Well, my pleasure.
And thank you to the kids.